Yeah. So, hi everyone. As the title suggests, the question that's on my mind is what even is real media in the present day? And to get into that, I'm going to cover in broad strokes where we sort of started with media, how we got to what we have today, what is wrong with it from obviously the security side of it. I mean, we're all security people here. What are the sort of policies and procedures in place that keeps disinformation and misinformation at bay? And then what we need to do to solve all these problems that we're seeing in the present day. So I'm an alum here at Abertay. So I thought might as well give a talk at security because I didn't manage to do it at my time here. I used to be a security consultant, so for a few years I was doing the app and network pen testy stuff. And then I moved into becoming a developer. Just creating things is no better feeling, to be honest. So currently working on a provenance-focused social media. It's called Frankly, and I will be talking about it later, but right at the end, because I'm not trying to make it a sales pitch. So we'll start off then with like the background of media. So a little disclaimer as well that a lot of what I'm going to be talking about and focused on is images. I'm not trying to belittle the world of those with vision issues, but it's just that there's so much content in this world, or in this space rather, and images are the easiest way to get the sort of ideas across. So the way that we would capture a lot of ideas and events in the past was based on these two mediums, like painting and drawing what we saw and writing the tales of what happened. Very opinion-based written commentary, and then when it comes to art and the actual drawing process, it takes a lot of time to like capture that into a medium. You're not exactly in a position where you can simply draw up something that you've even never seen as well yourself. So you need to have also been present, and there's elements of word of mouth and so on that really plays into all of this. So yeah, they're not exactly the perfect mediums for capturing things exactly how they occurred. And this led to some interesting results. And this is the first part of audience participation, if it decides to go for it. Okay, it's already given you the answer, but let's pretend that we didn't see that, and guess what all these different animals are. If anyone actually wants to give a guess, or we're just going to skip, feel free. Because, I mean, that one's an absolute state on the top left there.
During evolution is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like it's way out of the water, but they capture the essence.
Yeah, and then, yeah, so obviously different stages of its life cycle is what you're trying to say was captured here. Yeah. A lot of this misinformation around, I mean, spoiler, obviously came up, hippopotamuses. A lot of it came around the actual name of a hippo. It translated to like waterhorse. So obviously, you know, you hear waterhorse and you draw like the swan thing or some fish with extra legs. Like you needed to sort of, again, this clicker is fucking shite. Yeah, you needed to be there to see it. You needed to, you know, be present, and obviously that's not possible. Like these things live in very specific climates, and here in Scotland, that's quite a pilgrimage just to see a hippo. So the gossip, the rumours, the spoken word around these things would conjure images that obviously didn't reflect what was real. And again, these mediums are slow. People aren't going to stop in the middle of pillaging a village so that the picture can be, or the painting can be drawn. And the written word about what happened, if everyone in said village was taken out, who's actually going to write about it from the point of view of the defender. So, thankfully, when tech advanced, it took away a lot of the limitations in terms of capturing what was real and what happened. Sound waves, light photons, they weren't just a transient thing. They just flew by, never to really occur again in the same fashion. It was something that was captured then into a medium. In terms of chemical film, obviously it was quite a specific set of events needed to happen in order to capture it appropriately. So there was an element of trust in the science behind it. And yeah, of course, the point that I'm trying to place here with the dates is that what mattered most was when the majority of people started to have the opportunity to access this tech. Commercial cameras and commercial record players, gramophones, etc., capturing it in the house. And then the combination of these two to result in video as well. So, in terms of audio, music took on a whole new depth of appreciation. We're able to play it in the homes. Science didn't used to be, in fact, like a audience style thing where some guy would be down here at the front performing a science experiment, and it was down to all the people who witnessed it to spread the news of what the experiment yielded. And then journalism as well, in the form of the newspaper. It took a long time for photos to actually be incorporated in there, but of course, seeing those things provides a bit more assurance that it happened. There's an element of feeling present. And you wouldn't think anyone would abuse it. But of course, that happens. This is one of the more light-hearted first examples of abuse with photography. These are 2 of the 5 photos referred to as the Cottingley Fairies, which were quite a fun example of what amateur photographers in 1917 were able to come up with, trying to replicate slice of life imagery where they were interacting with fairies and gnomes. And none other than the scientific mind behind Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a massive spiritualist, saw these photos and was like, I saw the proof I need. I'm going to spread the good word. And at the time, I believe he was working at a newspaper company, so he was like, I want to get it printed. I want to tell the world. I want everyone to know. And they were like, they're obviously fake. And he's like, I'll prove it. He went to 3 different validators for this imagery. One of them being Kodak. 2 of those companies then agreed the photos aren't tampered with. Like, these are real photos. Because, yeah, the photos weren't edited in post. It was a staged event. The guys at Kodak specifically said, like, this obviously isn't real, but, like, the photo itself wasn't doctored. He's like, good enough for me. Getting it printed. Yeah. So, that's like an idea of what an individual was capable of, even quite early on in the commercial photography times. And then you go into nation states as well, and both of these, of course, being photos of the same man, different times of his life, Joseph Stalin. A lot of people see this one on the left of him when he was quite a young man. And it's quite funny because I recently realised that this even was slightly doctored. This was after he'd already died. Some museum was setting up an exhibit of, like, look at all our sexy leaders, I guess. And they put the Vaseline filter on him. When he was younger, he had, like, acne scarring. Obviously, it's quite a minor thing, but, like, they edited the photo to make him look a lot more younger and a more attractive leader, I guess. It's a bit weird. But then, separately as well, those of you might be familiar with the new Google product, Magic Eraser, and Stalin was really good at that, cutting out a young lad there called Nikolai, who was just kicked out of the Communist Party, and obviously he wanted to change what actually happened and say, well, I was never associated with this man. So, like I said earlier as well, it used to be that the systems to capture this imagery was quite a straightforward process. It was the laws of physics and chemistry, and the light was in itself painting the scene onto the film. There was no middlemen, no gadgetry, no SD cards. There's no interpretation for how it happened. There's no way to manipulate that particularly easily, especially when you've got this source. You can always point to the film and say, well, this is the original. Like, this is how it happened. But nowadays, we have a lot more CCD sensors. There's still some diehard film photography sort of people out there, but when these started to become particularly affordable in the mid-80s, the photography community, a lot of the people who were really passionate about film-based photography were sort of sounding the alarm, like, this is it, truth is going away, but we'd largely ignored them because, what's the worst that can happen? And then we sped run even further. All those scientific advancements, we now just carry them about in our pockets. We're able to consume all the cat, dog media that we like. So, yeah, no one uses it for anything that important, so we're all fine, I guess. But, yeah, of course, it isn't all cat and dog photos. There's a whole rabbit hole, again, going on with the animal pun, that we can go down, of all the different facets of society that really rely on media in order to convey a sense of trust. I don't want to cherry pick, or I don't want to try and cover the whole spectrum there. So I will cherry pick, rather, citizen journalism as a good example of what we need to be focusing some of the effort on at the moment. We used to consume our news through an AM PM paper. Again, media started to build itself into there to make you feel present with the media, make you feel like a witness to the events that occurred in the present as well. But with the modern world and these modern devices comes a modern consumption habit. Some people, myself included, rely on independent reviewers on YouTube to say, is this technology actually going to be, the one that I want to bring something into the house? Or even quite a few steps further, there are Facebook groups that circulate their politically charged content amongst themselves, slightly echo chambery fashion, but regardless, a lot of that, in order to convey points, is through media. And when you combine Facebook and Instagram under the metasphere, that's 1.65 billion images being uploaded daily, according to one source. And then on YouTube, there was another source that said in June of 2022, for every minute, there was 500 hours of content being uploaded. And then there's crazy Elon buying Twitter and, making truth and authenticity $8 a month. So from the citizen journalism space, and especially when a lot of these pieces of media get circulated up to the bigger organizations, we're relying on fact-checking mechanisms to validate each individual piece of media before it gets published in a more official manner, and relying on forensics methods just to ensure that there hasn't been any tampering with a lot of these pieces of media. And then, of course, to grease the wheel, there's obviously elements of automation for both to ensure that there's no mis or disinformation being brought into the modern news cycle. Those things do happen, of course. There's examples that I'll go into later a good one that I actually don't have in the slides later that I'll go into is game footage from Arma 2, a military simulator, getting put on the BBC News as a headline story because they thought it was captured in the field. I mentioned mis and disinformation, and there's subtle differences between these two that I just wanted to quickly address. Misinformation is the less serious one. There's less harm in misinformation, less importance in typically the information being misconstrued. It's more like rumours, insults and pranks. But then you go into disinformation, and that's media content that's out there to deliberately deceive people into a false narrative. Propaganda, phishing, and just general hoaxes would fall more under that category. Like I said, that's the two main axes that define the two, or where it fits between the two different terms. Of course, I'll use it synonymously, but things like fairies, or evidence of fairies, that lives in the middle. Is it that important that it's disinformation? I don't know. That's why it falls within the sort of space where I'll use them interchangeably. And it's all personal opinion as well. I mean, I personally would think that cosmetic brands touching up the afters on a before and after for their new products, that falls into misinformation. You see what Kylie Jenner and stuff are doing, where they're photoshopping their thumb out of these Instagram photos that they're putting up as part of their ad campaigns. Yeah, but the importance there isn't too high. As the consumer, you can obviously just not buy that product. But then things like war propaganda, showing a bolstered interpretation of troops or equipment, that's life's at stake. The importance shoots up, even if it's only one extra tank, for example. That's quite firmly in disinformation. Oh, don't know how that got in there. But yeah, so the big issues then that really we see from a societal perspective, the idea of these filters coming in is obviously body image issues. You see a lot of that, but generally, just having those little subtle edits as the default now, it makes it hard to obviously guess what's actually real and what's not. I have a few videos that I might show at the end that really put the point across here, but I'm scared Keynote will crash on me or something. So, yeah. And because of the accessibility of these things, it's trivial. Why wouldn't you do it? Is almost becoming the narrative, which is a little bit disappointing. And then we don't even need to have someone stood in front of the camera and the photo being taken to manipulate it. We can simply stage the event, like I mentioned with Arma 2, and what BBC News decided was headline content. There's cases where you can just simply, spawn a tank in one of those things and take a video of that, or, taking photos of people that don't that don't actually exist. And again, the main stress and the importance here is that this has become so trivial. There's just no need for the real camera to be there. You feed your photo into a system enough times and it can maybe even generate photos of you on the beach, for example. And especially through systems like generative AI, which are really taking the scene, things like ChatGPT and all of the different image-based models. It's one of the greatest disinformation machines that have kicked out recently. It's not all the silly deep-faked audios of Trump and Biden on the headsets that I'm sure everyone else has been seeing on Twitter recently, which honestly crack me up. But there is the greater impacts. Things like, at its worst, revenge porn. People's faces being put onto the actresses in particular scenes, or even, again, coming back to phishing, using someone's real face gives an opportunity for you to reverse and find whether or not that person actually sent you a message. And then the consequences for a lot of this stuff hasn't been nation-state levels yet. But, for example, one maliciously generated political speech may cast like the Pakistan and India situation into further disarray, America and China, Russia and NATO. So there is obviously some real impacts that can be seen that could potentially be targets in the future. But I'll bring it back a bit. We'll have a little fun game of audience participation that will hopefully work this time. I'm going to show 4 photos. These first 2 here that I'll just keep on screen whilst I explain. Basically, I've generated some AI faces, and it's a matter of what do you believe are the real humans, and which do you believe are the AI faces here. Here's the last 2. I'll give you another moment here. I'm obviously using the contrast of this monitor, or the projector, to my advantage. But, yeah, if anyone wants to have a guess at who is real, who is not, feel free. Yep. You think image 1 is fake? Do you have any idea of why? Okay. Yeah, the light reflections, yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, that's obviously a major part of it, and the sense of uncanny valley that you might be experiencing through that. Yeah?
The shoulder is really messed up. That's a giveaway.
Oh, the shoulder on the right-hand side, or just the lack of shoulder on the left? Both. Yeah. Any other guesses? Sure, when you go.
I was going to say on the flip side, number 2 and number 4 look slightly more real than number 2. I think just because of the natural kind of skin reflections.
Yeah. I'll take the last 2 that I saw here, starting with you.
Number 4 is the teeth sort of slightly not aligned correctly. The teeth is often a bit different for AI, so...
Yep. That's a good shout. You're getting to what I'm about to go into in a minute. And the last one up there.
Yeah, the ears on the floor, the nose. Is that like
Yeah, I mean, all the features are telltale signs, but yeah, the ears are certainly one that, especially in most headshots that these things will be taking in, like, it may not have, like, a lot of side profiles to train on the ears too well. And these photos all look a lot more human than some of the ones from Liquid, but I'll assure you that none of these are actually real. Someone in B-Sides Basingstoke actually caught on that quite quickly. I was impressed. But yeah, none of these are real here. I'm trusting the clicker again for a while. But we made this thing in order to spot the deepfakes. And I'm just borrowing it because I was a bit lazy to write my own. So this is quite focused on video, but things like asymmetric jewellery can be a really big giveaway because that's not typically the focus of someone who's declaring a success case to these algorithms. So especially when it comes to glasses, noticing little bumps can really help. Obviously, yes, you mentioned earlier, I think in the middle, about the teeth. Sometimes it doesn't understand how many incisors a person should have, for example. So noticing 3 or 1 or 1.5 is quite useful. I'll go into a few extra examples here as well. So this is what I was saying about the asymmetric jewellery, where I'll just do this instead, on the left ear is some weird, like, drippy metal jewellery thing, and then on the right there's nothing. And it's like, yeah, okay, the asymmetric jewellery obviously does exist, but this does not look intentional in any form. And again, I use the projector to my advantage, but the hairs on the one on the right start to get a bit wispy, and like the transparency just completely goes to shot. If you're looking at it on the screen that I've got down here, you can see a little bit of like rainbow colours just like clipping through as a result. The final one in terms of like glasses here, it just straight up clips into the cheekbone. And then there's whatever the fuck that demon thing is in her shoulder. Like, especially, again, when you're looking at it on my screen down here, it looks like they've rendered like forearm style skin. So you have like really hairy like shoulder thing going on. And it's pretty cracked. That thing's in my dreams. So, yeah. And this is the halfway point recap for anyone who's nursing the security hangover. So I talked about the hippo drawings all quite quickly as a result of my slides giving up, to describe why we needed the cameras, obviously, in the first place. They solved the misinformation of just word of mouth. I then went into the cases of some of the early edits to show that this isn't a new problem, it's just getting easier. And the cat's out of the bag in terms of these tools already. We can't exactly run backwards. And yeah, the potential societal harm is obviously real, equally to individuals. And again, I've quickly brushed on it, but like self-image is obviously one that's getting hit quite hard with these sort of tools and these sort of filters. So what can we do to fix these problems? If you think about it from the perspective of like every edit's a bad edit, it just makes this a bit more of a binary question for now. So we could train the user to just find all bad or all edits all the time. This is an example here of North Korea in 2013 sending out some propaganda about how they ordered in some new hovercraft. Obviously, they didn't all arrive, so they ended up having to fake a little bit of it. So these two hovercraft here are the angle of attack they're coming into on the beach is the exact same. The lighting is the exact same. And where the people are even standing on it are the exact same. Beyond you considering the fact that they are perhaps the same hovercraft, it's just a bit too coincidental. You run it through some forensics tools as well, and it just straight up shows it's a copy-paste job. And the same with those two boats at the back. And the boxes there represent zooming these things to the exact same size, and it really just paints the picture it's just a really bad copy-paste job. Obviously, they've had 10 years to improve on it. This was 2013. But yeah, we could teach the user with examples like this how to detect these things, right? We could teach them the same way that I did earlier about the AI tools. So what does everyone think? Is that going to work? Rhetorical question. No, I don't think so. I mean, phishing emails, that's a solved problem, right? No one's clicking on them anymore. The skill set shouldn't be a prerequisite. We shouldn't have to do a Pearson VUE exam to make a Facebook account, for example, right? And the tools, I mentioned, obviously, that was 2013. They're just, the tools and the methods are only going to get more sophisticated. So training's going to fall behind. No shot. So, let's maybe leave it to the professionals, the people that have gone through this training and who do it as a job, right? They both jump on the keyboard and smash through all the content that's coming in. Again, just assuming all edits are bad edits just for the sake of getting that sort of warning almost that this may contain an edit or this does contain an edit, just to make the user a bit more informed. That might be the way to do it. Not really. We can't expect people to pull the all-nighters to get through the, 500 hours of content per minute on YouTube. And we certainly aren't going to see someone volunteer to pay for it. YouTube's already making profit, and they claim in a sort of they are just making profit. They're not going to then sacrifice a whole bunch of their own profits to make misinformation and disinformation a solved problem. And the users as well, they're going to hate the delays that are incurred through this review process. It's just not going to really work. And there's not always videos being uploaded publicly. There's the unlisted, for example, on YouTube. There's the groups, the private groups in Facebook, and even in Twitter Spaces. People aren't going to just be happy that one extra human from outside is looking into it. So we maybe roll back how we're training people. We incur a bit more of a journalistic perspective on it, just focusing on the content that's trying to be portrayed. Did that happen? Is that really, or is that an unedited photo? Not looking too far into it, just like do you see a flying pig or anything crazy like that? Understanding who was the author of the piece of media, who was captured in it, getting some context clues of when, where, and why they were there. You can then start to narrow down contextually as well, like, was this real based on, if they said they were in, like, Dundee at this time of year, well, the sun wouldn't have been out, so why is that a sunny image? Or it was raining that day. There's historic records to prove that. Or that's straight up the Eiffel Tower in the background. That's not quite right. Again, not all cases are equal as well when it comes to this sort of stuff. So you would end up sacrificing some of the lesser seen content. You're just relying on people to talk about the most important stuff. That sometimes works. Like Twitter Birdwatch. It's not too bad at sort of confirming the content and claims being made on your behalf. But it relies on like a Stack Overflow style contribution manner. I compared it to Stack Overflow because I'm a developer. It's just the easiest way to compare it for myself. It does an okay job, but again, as mentioned, it relies on focusing on a subset of the overall content. And then as well, you need to consider who are these anonymous people who are contributing the answers and why are we meant to trust them? You go back to even Stack Overflow and ChatGPT's emergence, and they got inundated with answers to Stack Overflow questions that were generated from ChatGPT. It's a bit of a big block of text, I'll TLDR. They basically put in a policy to say, don't do it, even if the answer is right, because it's just too much, and we need to just sort of chill out with it. So what if we get something else in? An AI is generating all this content, so let's get an AI to capture it and declare whether or not it's real, right? So it's an okay idea at the start, but then when that tool's out there, someone else who's making, even if the tool comes out and it's perfectly able to capture every single bad piece of content, at some point, new content will be made that then can bypass it, and the bad guys then have leverage to now train their generator to be better. And we get stuck in this Ouroboros, which reminds me as well of antivirus. a problem solved in the 90s when we came out with the first one, right? You go beyond even the checksum methodology that original antiviruses would have been based on, and you talk about modern day heuristics and pattern-based checks. It's still obviously a little bit of a losing battle when everyone's able to generate this stuff themselves. So this is the final quarter of the slides. Maybe we should go from a reactive analysis from all this content that's being generated to a proactive validation that what you're generating is real at the time it was captured. This is similar to an existing system called provenance. There's the 3 examples here of paintings, diamonds, and airplane parts, where as soon as possible, a record of its creation and its life cycle is established. As soon as diamonds are mined, they're sent up in a legal mine. It's sent up to be laser engraved in order to establish its removal from the ground and its entering into the market. And that's to remove the possibility of malicious diamonds making it in from what are referred to as blood mines. Or blood diamonds, sorry, they're referred to as. Additionally, in terms of paintings, not always is on the exact moment of creation records being generated, but maybe a few months or years after, someone comes in and validates that the materials that were in use and the methods that were in use, and carbon dating, all of that, like the time that they expect it to be created, states that this should be made by the person who they say it was made from. And again, similar to diamonds, at the moment of creation, airplane parts, they get the ID on them as well. So if you compare this into digital media, there's a seamless duplication from every single file as you copy and paste it across your hard disk. And there's a lot of media that's being generated all the time, that obviously I mentioned earlier. But computers are really good at the boring stuff and just doing this really rote fashion of like following along with that massive volume of content in the first place. So could we take some of the qualities from a system of provenance like this and replicate that into a digital system? So that's a bit of what I've been working on recently, and the ideas that I think should take place going forward to help curb disinformation. There's already some solutions on the shelf as well that can contribute to a ledger of all of these actions or all of these images being taken and where they came from. Systems I'm referring to are called distributed ledgers. And I'll elaborate on what that is for those of you that don't know, in a timely fashion, of course. So ledgers are like a database where you record every single transaction that happens. So every single time something was added or removed, it's just something that's added to the overall structure. And it's not a point-in-time capture like databases are. So distributed ledgers then takes this technology, or takes these captures and spreads them across multiple systems. They network between each other using a system called consensus, so that they speak to one another in order to confirm the state that they're at, what has been added, who added it, and is it okay to come into the ledger. So they reach this state of consensus between themselves. That's cool. Blockchains evolved from that system. Proof of base trust, they brought in an element element of proof-based trust to address some concerns they had with too many people trying to be involved in individual transactions. I'm not trying to buy into all the racist NFT hype. I'm just talking about it as if it's a tool, so don't worry. And yeah, there's obviously points to be made in regards to power consumption of running a system like this. But the spoiler alert is there's not an excuse anymore to buy all those fancy NVIDIA graphics cards and calling it work. One level below blockchains as well is a permissioned version of blockchains. You get to keep all the security goodies from the level above, but you get to close the doors a little bit on who can actually contribute to a network like this. So, just a bit of an elaboration as well of what that tool actually brings us. Hopefully most of the people in here will know of the data structure, a singly linked list, where each item refers to the previous one or the next one. In this case, it's referring backwards instead of forwards. Each entry into the ledger has a hash associated with it. For those that don't know what hash is, that's a one-way function that takes in any level of input and gives a fixed length of output that's consistent. So the same garbage data coming in will always result in the same hash coming out. Just to touch on power draw as well, as a bit of an elaboration before we completely swap off of blockchains. This is the power draw of the Ethereum network. And then at one point it completely bottomed out. And that's from just going back a year from a couple of days ago. So the analogy they use is the difference between the Eiffel Tower and a Lego figurine. That's how far the power draw dropped, where in terms of terawatt hours that the overall network consumed. But if we're deploying our own one, in order to establish where all these pieces of media came from, what specifically would we want to store on it? The best ideas here would be a hash of the sensor input, just because, again, a hash is a consistent length of output that's quite easy to store in a ledger like this, as opposed to the whole media item itself. Some information as well on who the creator is, the device that it was created from. Going back to my phone as an example, the device information might be the phone's model, but then specifically which camera on the phone and the settings of which that camera was at the time of capture as well. And the more of this information that you sort of try and pile in, the harder it will get to fake. Of course, when you go back to the idea of the generative AI stuff, yes, they can generate a face now, but then you're adding more information that they need to very specifically replicate. It's adding to the complexity. And the whole system that you would want in a digital provenance style fashion would be you're tracking the light photons coming in to the camera at the very start, and you're wanting to track it all the way to the end consumer. So the main points are that you're wanting to secure that capture device as much as possible. As soon as the image is captured, you want it to be fingerprinted and securely held within the device. You'd want to store it in a distributed ledger in order to keep it public for everyone to see that record of creation and understand and knowing that the technology there doesn't allow for malicious edits without it being transparent due to the ledger section of that technology. Of course, for people to use the system, it needs to be transparent, clear what's happening, and clearly describing to the end user what is actually the assurances the system provides. So ensuring that the user interface makes that clear and it explains everything to the best of its ability. And of course, you need the assurances that the system's underlying technologies are all the information is held securely at every step. The devices may initially be pre-served secrets. This will just ensure that we know who it was that actually took the photo and how it got to us, for example. We ensure that the hashing algorithms at play are going to not result in collisions or duplicate outputs, effectively, from unique inputs. We need to also ensure that all of the data is held securely, both in transit and at rest. And there's plenty of practical issues that could come from a system like this that would need to be addressed, but this is all part of, claiming that it's not the magic answer for all of the problems we are seeing, but it's something that would also get worked on. Very similar to the systems of pre-signed executables for things like installing your software on a home computer. You want to just ensure that this information net is keeping you as safe as possible, as far as possible. So anchoring, as we refer to it when you put it on the distributed ledger, should happen as soon as possible, as close to the sensor where possible. So in the case of slightly dumber cameras as opposed to full-on smartphones, you may want it to just fire off that information, say even via like the SMS network as soon as possible, just to get those assurances in as fast as possible. The consumer, again, needs to be able to verify this at the end result, validating that no edits have taken place, and again, being able to interpret the assurances that come with a system like this. Of course, even going back to the newspaper example as well, not all images will fit in a newspaper column. There is legitimate cases of editing, like cropping, that need to be considered so that the images will fit in an appropriate space or have been slightly rotated to ensure that the person is standing straight, for example. We then would, of course, need to rely on secure input devices. So ensuring that the system is secure as a whole and that the individual devices are tamper-resistant or tamper-evident. And then, again, coming back to that transparent UI, you must work on a system that's clear and easy to use so that trust can be formed between you and the user. And working on a lot of this tech in the open as well will provide a lot of that trust. So, yeah. An example here of a system that would be relating to this would be one of the ones that I've been working on with my team at Open Origins. It's a iOS app where you're able to just capture images within the app. We build up as much metadata as possible around the image from the sensors data available as early as possible. We get it fired into a DLT so that from the point that it's been captured in there, you can assure that no edits have taken place by the time you consume that piece of information. Authenticity information on what device it was captured on, when it was captured, when we got it in our system, the location these things were captured in as well. In this case, it was a teachers' strike in London. So then, of course, at the end, to fill in that accepted edits scenario, you've got things like the QR code to link back to the original asset on our site so that you can, for example, if you have trust in this system, you can fall back from perhaps another site where the image might have been compressed or manipulated in some fashion through the upload process there. So, yeah, we see that the generative AI sort of offensive tool set is quite heavy, and there's a lot going on. They've had a lot more time to get up to pace. So it's a bit of a David and Goliath trying to catch up to a system like that and build up a system of transparency and security in what's been quite a security lax system in general, photography as a whole. I'm going to skip this slide here, but that's the long and short of it. I'd love to hear questions. I've got Cadbury's cream eggs. I'll happily throw at people if you ask a really good question, or if you're being really annoying, I'll aim at your head. But I've been told off for the idea of throwing them. So you'll just need to come down at the end to collect them. The final point I just wanted to make before going on to questions is that, frankly, the app it's in a bit of a closed source state at the moment, or closed entry state. We've got invite code system. If you're interested in having a look at the app, you can scan the QR code. It's taking you to my link tree, but I've got links from there to the appropriate page in the App Store. And separately, for students in first, second, third year, we're looking for brand ambassadors. Again, the link will be part of there. I'll leave this slide up now as we go to questions. So, thank you.
So, a thought on this app is it not like the very old example we gave of fairies, where we went to Kodak and they went, yes, this is indeed an unaltered image.
Yeah.
You could just still prove where it came to the camera in the first place.
Yeah, so the question was, am I not, or the example I gave earlier in regard to Kodak and the staged imagery, that's a fair point, that a system like this could give false assurances in a staged environment, but all of that extra metadata as well that's being provided through the transparent UI would hopefully help reduce cases of, for example, staged content getting through the net. Arming the user with as much information as possible is kind of key, which I might not have made clear through the metadata and transparent UI part, but the hope is that the more information you have, the better informed you can be and the better choices you can make, and you can rely a lot more on the system than doing all of the information and tamper checking yourself. Good question. Thank you. Yep.
If you're a photographer yourself, for example, when you use your camera, because like DSLRs are better than your phone, would Frank have an option for you to actually upload images straight from, like, say you upload it on your computer and then you upload it to Frank and to have that metadata there, and would that be something else?
So the question was if you were to upload it through a separate device onto your phone and then try and get it into the app.
Yeah.
So the main point of what we're trying to do, frankly, is sort of restricting the capture in the first place. So you can only use it through the in-app camera, very similar to how Snapchat was quite early on before it had the gallery access. So the idea is, the content is assured because we were there at the point of capture to almost say, like, it happened. So, good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
You mentioned that you need to upload it almost immediately, so otherwise something could tap with it. How do you deal with people trying to capture photos or whatever in areas where there's not the constant connections, where also trying to take journalistic images, they might not have that kind of uploadability until they're out?
Yeah. So the question, again, just to recap, was how do you handle low, no signal situations where someone captures it initially and trying to get that to the DLT as fast as possible? So especially for the low signal, the idea of getting that fingerprint up as quickly as possible is super important, because from that you can assure no edits have taken place, because the way that the hashing algorithm fundamentally works is any edits would immediately change that fingerprint. No signal, you're then also relying on strong on-device security, signing it on the hardware level as fast as possible, and hiding that information into the hardware until such a time you can upload the full, or even that initial fingerprint, and then the full Monty further on. A good example might be Google Photos. You take a photo on your device, you take 10 more. It doesn't necessarily upload them all until you're on, for example, a Wi-Fi connection, because it doesn't want to absolutely shag your data. So, yeah. Good question, no. Thank you. Yep.
Is there any reason for the centralized ledger architecture that you've demonstrated there, or would there more use of that would be a distributed ledger that the trusted device to actually do the sign of the phone after itself?
Yeah. So the question was in regards to the centralization of the diagram I gave for the distributed ledger. We obviously aim to work with, for example, the BBC and major news organisations, so that we are not the source of truth, because we fundamentally are building this system so that we won't be the source of truth. That will be shared amongst multiple organisations, ideally with different views. So, for example, in the US, you have your major news organisations on each side of the debate. Having both of them contributing to the upkeep of a system like this would ensure no biased content really getting in as well. The aim is using DLTs and this specifically permissioned blockchains as an example of inviting trusted sources to help maintain this system, and not just bearing the weight all ourselves. But yeah, good question. Thank you. Danny, stop now. Cool, no worries. Well, thank you. It's good chatting.